In a modern world, there is oftentimes overstimulation. But what does that really mean, and how is that showing up in different areas, whether that be in kids or adults? And why are we having this issue? Well, to dive into that, let's first talk about how we get stimulated mentally. And so, what's happening is we have different forms of sensory stimuli. And in a world, we're exposed to different smells, we're exposed to different sounds, different noises, different lights, etc. And in a modern society, there's so much of this. And this is really an overstimulation that's happening, especially when you think about kids' shows or different games, especially on tablets, things like that, where it tends to be an abundance of loud noises, bright colors, and lots of movement. Think about if you've ever walked the toy aisle at Target. You can you are overwhelmed with different noises and sirens and bright colors. And you think that for our kids, the idea is for all of these toy companies, they want to catch kids' attention and want to keep their attention. And so everything is fighting over and over on itself for what can be more stimulating so we can catch the attention, except for the fact that we've oftentimes gone too far and have too much stimulation. And so there's, especially in different shows and different toys, there's a push to say, hey, why don't we use toys with fewer bright colors or fewer lights or fewer sounds? How can we tone down the amount of stimulation in the environment? Because how is that contributing to the rise in behavioral issues that we're seeing pop up in kids? It's no denying that we are seeing kids that are more anxious and more stressed out than ever before with more symptoms. And so, what are some different factors? And so, sensory is one of them. This is playing a role, especially for kiddos who are hypersensitive to stimuli, especially those on the autism spectrum. Oftentimes, loud noises can be really overwhelming, even more so than just for their neurotypical peers. And in a world that is constantly trying to be louder, bigger, brighter, having more lights and more fireworks and louder noises, how is that impacting those who are already sensitive to stimuli? And so, really, the idea and then we have smell. So smell is another thing is we constantly are smelling different things, different fragrances, different smells, all sorts of things. And so we're constantly sending this stimuli. So the body has a gas pedal and a brake pedal. So our nervous system has fight or flight, which is gas pedal, and then parasympathetic, which is brake pedal. And when we're stimulating the body, we're pushing the gas pedal. And so when we're stimulating the body, we're causing the body to go into stress. And so really that's stress is not inherently bad. We are supposed to be able to go into stress and then go into relaxation, etc. But it's when we're constantly inundating ourselves with the stress, the brain is firing on and going fire alarm, but we're never able to get away from that stressor. And so what's happening is like in a world where we would have to run from an imminent danger, such as running from a tiger or running from a bear, we would run and the danger would then pass. We would have survived. And then the body would rest and digest, relax, and recover. And that's when you would really feel that exhaustion. But in a modern society, our stressors are not tigers and bears. Our stressors are things like work, technology, um, exercise, etc. Stressors that we can't escape from and that are constantly there. And so we're in an interesting space where we're never able to get away from that stressor. So we're constantly stressed. This is called chronic stress. And so we're not just saying our body isn't just going onto that gas pedal. running from the tiger or bear, and then being able to rest and recover. It's this constant state of this fire alarm or even low level stress, this constant that really is wearing down on our body. So, what we can do, especially for sensory processing kiddos that struggle with that, or even anybody who is experiencing the feeling of being overstimulated, which really ultimately is leading to a lot of people feel overstimulated and exhausted, is we can come in and, especially with chiropractic adjustments, push the brake pedal. And what that does is it helps us regulate down to a spot where we're more able to have the bandwidth in the system to adapt to different exposures and different stressors. Now, one of the main things we can do is we can push the brake pedal. Pushing the brake pedal is important because it also helps us filter the noise out better when we push the brake pedal. But other ways we can filter out the noise, or we can be mindful on all of the different ways we are stimulating. And also making sure that we're physically stimulating our bodies the way we need to and getting that energy out as well, not just mental energy. I had a really interesting conversation today, actually, with a patient. We were talking about a great book that I'm reading, and a lot of other parents are reading, called The Anxious Generation. And it's really talking about the impact of technology on our kiddos. And essentially, we've moved away from this play based childhood. And it clicked in my mind that it's similar to when I first got a doodle. And a doodle is, I have an Irish doodle. It's a saying to any dog that's mixed with a poodle. So I have an Irish doodle, and he's a very smart, highly energetic dog. And before I had a doodle, I had a Chihuahua, and a Chihuahua requires much different attention than a doodle. And especially when he's 12 pounds, if he doesn't listen well on a leash, I can continue to pull him. With a doodle, I realized the doodle has to be exercised and stimulated in different ways. And someone told me, they said, you can't just walk your dog and you can't just physically tire out your dog, but you also have to mentally stimulate your dog. And I thought, mentally stimulate my dog. What am I going to do? What is my dog going to do? Read? But it's so fascinating to think about all the different ways you can mentally stimulate it. And really, ultimately, a lot of this has a conversation too about kids. And really, and so obviously kids are much more sophisticated than dogs. And so this is a very simplified example. But I feel like the simplification really makes sense. And that what we've done with our kids is kids are spending so much time in front of TVs or in front of tablets or in front of video games or technology. And it's this constant stimulation mentally. And really to a point of an overstimulation mentally and an understimulation of the play-based childhood. So an understimulation of the physical exercise and an overstimulation of this constant mental stimulation that's really having this unused physical energy or this physical anxiety or resting energy that's really not being exerted. And then mentally, we're constantly either we have toys or technology or other things that are constantly stimulating our brain to a point of overstimulation. And really, this imbalance that's happening. And so it's so fascinating to kind of dive into some of that. So, really, if you're experiencing feeling overstimulated, or you feel like your kiddo is experiencing feeling overstimulated, or potentially has been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, great way to decrease it is push the brake pedal through chiropractic adjustments or other ways of pushing the brake pedal. And also make sure to focus on how are some other ways that we're exerting ourselves that isn't just being mentally stimulated. How are we getting outside? How are we playing? Or how are we tuning back in and tapping back into our physical body to help flush out some of that energy? So, food for thought on how different ways you or your child might be overstimulated. In our office, we do nervous system scans so we can check and see if you or your child are stuck on the gas pedal or on the brake pedal, and see where your body is at. We can also look at what's called an SEMG, which looks at the total energy, and that's that resting and energy we were talking about, and see how high that is. Because oftentimes in these kiddos, we notice that number is really high. And so there's this resting current of energy that's turning into either hyperactivity or behavioral issues or hypersensitivity to stimuli because there's just so much noise. And so, coming in with the chiropractic adjustments, we can decrease that noise. So, we'd love to scan you or your child, see where your body's at, and support you. But here are a few ideas or a few thoughts on sensory stimulation and how that may be impacting you. If you've learned something new in this video or had an aha moment about stimuli and how we're stimulated and overstimulated in our society, especially our kiddos, comment that below.